Welcome, Caps fans, to Father and Son Caps Precap for the Washington Capitals Pittsburgh Penguins game Tuesday, March 1st. Should be a good one. Obviously, it's a rivalry game. The Pens Caps games are always fun to watch. So today was also trade deadline day on Leap Day, February 29th, and we saw some interesting moves around the league. I know the Caps were maybe thinking that we were going to pick up Hamuse, and it looked like it was an even more feasible idea since we traded Connor Carrick and Brooks Lake to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Daniel Winnick. But we obviously didn't make any more moves than that.
Yeah, I think they were looking for a depth forward, and it didn't work out, according to Brian McCullen in the post-trade deadline comments. Last night, of course, with Lake and Carrick going to Toronto, I think the second rounder that we threw in there sweetened the deal so they would take on Lake's salary for the next 2 years. Was one of those things where you thought, okay, they freed up a few $1 million in cap space. Maybe they'll go and add another piece. I think they tried to do that. The right deal wasn't there. A couple funny things happened. There was a fake Bob McKenzie account that tweeted out that the Oilers and the Caps were closing in on a deal to send Jordan Eberle to Washington, and of course that ended up being completely false.
That would have been awesome, though.
These fake accounts always pop up at trade deadlines and also on signing day on July 1st.
Oh, yeah, you need to look for that little check mark next to the Twitter handle.
That's right.
But what is good about us not making another move is now we have a little over $3 million in cap space to work with. We've got Tom Wilson, we've got Marcus Johansson. These are guys that we could re-sign. We've got a couple other RFAs that we could.
I think Orlov and Lada.
And Jason Chimera he's an unrestricted free agent after this season. Looks like we might re-sign him. Maybe like a 1 year deal, maybe $1.5 million. Who knows?
Hard to say. We don't know who's going to be available and what might happen between now and July 1st.
Yeah, I do know that GMBM said that the hardest move of his career so far was having to tell Brooks Lake that he was going to be going to Toronto. Brooks Lake, he stems back to the Bondra trade. He's pre-2004 lockout Washington Capital. He's been a solid player, for the first 7 or 8 years he was with us. He was always a consistent fourth top point producer on the team. It's just recently been plagued by injuries, and his performance has really taken a dive. But he's a good figurehead to have in the locker room. He's a good guy to be a leader, and I think he's going to be a good leader for a very young Toronto team coming up.
I think he will. It's unfortunate for him. A lot of people are questioning the loyalty of the Caps. I do think that the loyalty was exercised when we didn't use an amnesty buyout on him a couple of years ago. During the lockout year, he went over and played in Europe, and he was injured. When he came back, he just wasn't quite the same ever since. It is unfortunate, but it is a business as well. The Caps had to make a decision. There's a lot of salary there at $4.5 a year and another year left on it. Toronto was one of the teams willing to take that on. Maybe Toronto, with all the players they're dumping, need to get to that salary floor. And he'll be the biggest contract on their roster right now.
And they're going to have no problem filling that $4.5 million a year. I think that was the big reason. We probably didn't even need to throw a second round pick in. We could have probably thrown a third round. They would have been okay with that. They were getting a pretty good deal out of it. And they're going to utilize Connor Carrick because half of the Toronto Maple Leafs are the current Toronto Marlies right now.
Yeah, from what we're reading, Toronto specifically asked for Connor Carrick. They really rank him high as a prospect. They considered him an A prospect. I don't think the Caps rated him as highly as Toronto and valued him as highly as Toronto did. Connor Carrick's smallish. He's got good mobility, but there are some deficiencies. So it's kind of hard. We see in our depth, we see guys like Christian Huss. We've guys like Madison Bowie. So there is Jonas Sigenthaler playing over in Europe. There are some guys in the pipeline along that blue line that maybe have a bigger upside than Connor Carrick, and that has yet to be seen. One interesting thing tonight, both Connor Carrick and Brooks Lake are slated to be in the lineup, from what I'm hearing. We'll see if that pans out. Shortly when they play.
And that doesn't surprise me because the Toronto Maple Leafs call up like 5 guys from the Marlies to play in tonight's game.
Be interested. They take on, I believe, the Lightning tonight.
Yeah, so that should be an interesting move.
So moving on to the Pens, one of the things that I kept hearing before the trade deadline is that the Pens may look to add a guy like Scott Hartnell. They may end up trying to add a guy like Dan Hamuse. They were looking at maybe a Chris Russell, maybe add a little bit more depth in their blue line, which I think, by the way, is their Achilles heel. Their blue line is not that deep. and they ended up not really doing any of that.
They didn't. I think that they were putting a little bit of pressure on that Hamuse trade. I think they were really looking at him too. Hamuse just was not interested in moving to the Eastern Conference, from what I hear. But yeah, that's really going to suck for the Penguins later in the season, because they would be probably the best team in the league if they had a deeper blue line. They've got plenty of offensive talent. I mean, obviously, early on in the season, things weren't really working out for them. There's a little bit of a disconnect between the coaching and the players, but they've still got, I mean, arguably one of the best raw talent rosters in the league. I mean, they've got Crosby, Malkin, they got Kessel, they got Chris Letang. They got Marc-Andre Fleury, who's been a solid goalie ever since
when he's
drafted.
When he's on.
It's easy to get into his head.
Yes, when he gets rattled, I think you can fill the net. But when he's on, he's on.
Yeah.
And you're right. Dan Hamhuis apparently made it very clear recently that he did not have any interest in going to an Eastern Conference team. So that basically took teams like Washington and Pittsburgh and anybody else that might want him off the radar screen. So I think it was Dallas was his number one choice, and apparently Dallas did not meet their demand.
They could not settle. They were apparently very close too. That's what I was hearing. Vancouver, I think they screwed up on this trade deadline day. They probably made it out worst of everyone.
Well, It's hard to say. I mean, and there are teams out there that are loading up on picks. Toronto has a ton of picks the next couple of drafts.
Toronto's got almost the entire second round next draft.
Well, they have a lot of picks. They have more than anybody in the NHL the next 3 years. The Capitals have given away a lot of picks. Although I think that there's some value in freeing up some salary space. I think Daniel Winnick comes in. I think he gives them a good another grinding forward that will weather them through the playoffs. If somebody goes down, he'll come in and fit right in. Generally plays center. I think he's going to wear number 26 for the Capitals. Will not play tomorrow against the Penguins, but apparently should be ready to go on Wednesday when the Washington Capitals play the Toronto Maple Leafs. Where in Washington, Brooks Light comes right back into the house. Connor Carrick right back into the house. That will be an interesting. I think that hopefully the Caps will give them a kind of a warm welcome back.
Oh no, Brooks Light is going to get a standing ovation from the Caps. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Joel Ward got a standing O at the beginning of the season when San Jose came here and wiped the floor with us. But
yes.
So the Penguins,
that was the game OV overslept.
That's true, and Backstrom was out too on that one. So. Losing 5-0. I mean, losing or missing your first star player or your top 2 star players that early on in the season, they can get into your head. But the Penguins, they dish out Plotkinov to Arizona. I was at the beginning of this season, actually over summer, I was thinking Plotkinov was going to be a long-term Pen. He seemed to really fit into their system. He'd be a consistent second liner. I was kind of surprised to see him go. I'm interested to see how he's going to do with the Coyotes because I think he'll fit into their system now. And, they got Viktor Tikhonov, so it looks like they're building up a little Russian base over there.
Well, and the other interesting thing about the Penguins tonight is they trade Plotkinov to the Coyotes, and who do they play tonight?
They play the Coyotes tonight.
That's right. So Plotkinov basically goes from one locker room to the other.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, that's gonna be interesting on his end. He didn't even have to travel.
Nope.
This game's in Pittsburgh. But so for tomorrow's game, I'm thinking we are going to destroy the Penguins. I think it's going to be a 4-0 shutout. I think Holtby is going to get his 3rd shutout of the season. And I think that Mike Richards is going to get a goal. Alex Ovechkin is going to get a goal. And I know I've said this the last 2 games, but Nicky Backstrom is going to have a 2-point night, 1 goal, 1 assist.
That's a pretty bold prediction. I've been predicting the Caps to kind of win. After a loss like we had the other day, against Chicago yesterday, the Caps tend this year not to lose 2 in a row, and they tend not to play 2 poor games in a row. Although they still have yet to put a. By the way, in the Chicago, we were hoping for a fast start. They started quickly. Second period was a different story. I think they put a little bit more of a game together, and with the weak defense that the Pens tend to have compared to a lot of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. I'll say that certainly with Crosby, Malkin, and Kunitz, they're going to generate something. I'll go 4-2.
Okay.
And I'll predict Ov will get a goal, and I predict that Oshie will score. I predicted he would score last time. Came very close, didn't. I predict he'll get it this time.
All right. I mean, that sounds good to me.
So, yeah, that would be great. Just come away with a victory, and I'll be happy. We're going to be at the game, and it'll be fun.
All right, guys. Until next time.
Let's go, Caps!